this section asks for everybody here to ask questions, and I ask you to prepare them in your mind and for somebody to be ready with their first question, because if you don't do it, I'll start asking questions. Nobody wants to hear any more from me. We were going to just ask if anybody here had their genome, their own personal genome sequence. Has anyone had that done? You have? Oh, can you describe the experience, or would you say...
Well, the thing that counts, I went to an American website called 23andMe. You can have that done for $99 now.
$99? Yeah. It used to cost £1 million, didn't it?
We're not comparing quite the same thing, I think. One's full sequencing and one's SNPs, but yeah.
Okay. Now, if everyone has their genome sequenced, is that going to... would that make treatment much more expensive for everybody, and will we be able to afford it, or would it make it a lot cheaper or easier or more directed? How's it going to work, Dr. Madame?
I think it's going to make, I think ultimately it's going to, firstly I would say that I'm pretty sure within our lifetime, if not well before that, I think every child will have its genome sequenced when it's born. It'll become so cheap to do, and for better or for worse, I think the Pandora's box has been opened, and as a species, we're not very good at closing a lid. So I think it'll happen. I think there's huge opportunities there. And I would argue it's going to make treatment cheaper, because most patients we treat, in cancer it's definitely the case, but I would argue in almost all branches of medicine, most patients we treat do not benefit from treatment. And part of the...
So you're eliminating that.
You would eliminate that. I think the ability to optimize how we treat. Interestingly, when I talk to patients, and we talk about this aspect of sequencing the personal genome, patients' biggest concern is, well, will the insurance companies act on this? That's kind of, within about 5 minutes of talking about it, that's a number one question. And I was talking to the Association of British Insurers last week about genomes, and they're quite frankly not really interested. They said, this is public perception, which is so divorced from reality. They're much more interested in BMI, hypertension, and socioeconomic factors. So the perception is that there's a big risk. I mean, I would argue it's huge.
Not now, but maybe they will become interested.
I think it's going to be quite a while. And I think there are risks, and that is one of the risks. But I would argue that the potential benefits will be huge in having the knowledge to look at a patient who's going in for an operation and to estimate risk of having an adverse reaction to an anesthetic agent. I think there'll be the ability to peek within genomes and actually decipher some of that.
Okay, I'm looking to see if we have a question from the room. Yes, sir.
Cancer, whoever you speak to, they never know the definition of it and why it's happened. You talk a lot about the environmental things that are the cause of things. When do you feel that you would be in a position to say what causes different forms of cancer?
You're an expert here. I mean, I think cancer is an inevitable, it's an oddly theological issue, I often think, cancer, because it turns on our own inborn weakness. What does evolution care about? It cares about the survival of DNA. It doesn't care about the survival of the individuals who bear DNA. And one of the biggest puzzles in biology is how are babies born young? Okay, it's amazing. 2 elderly and battered pieces of protoplasm, and I mean everybody in this room there, get together and with a simple gesture produce a new one, okay, which is young. What that's telling us is that there is an intrinsic aging process in our bodily cells, cancer being part of that. Okay, cancer is much more common because people are living for much longer, not because cancer is getting worse. But there is this sort of soul of the genome, which are the cells that lead to sperm and egg, and they do not suffer from that. They have the particular enzymes that prevent them from aging and going out of control. So I think it's the nature of the beast that cancer is part of our very being. I don't think we'll ever cure cancer in the sense that we cured smallpox, okay, which is an external agent. However, we can certainly do much, much better than we're doing now.
Listening to your talk earlier on, are you concerned that if we know too much about genetics, we'll stop thinking about the environmental factors and our personal behavior factors?
I think so. What's interesting is the way that people respond. One of the standard comments that you hear, and I'm sure you've heard it, when we sequence your genome, will you be able to say to a baby, you're going to die on the 13th of February you know, 1998, that shows my age, 2098. The answer is, well, to a degree, yes. And that seems shocking. But if you walk into your doctor's surgery, he or she will tell you with great accuracy within 1 minute the day you're going to die on. The questions are very, very obvious. Number one, how old are you? Okay, it doesn't take that long to work that out. Secondly, are you a man or a woman? Women live longer than men. Thirdly, how old were your parents when they died? Do you smoke? Are you overweight? What's your blood pressure? And most important, what's your postcode? Okay? In the city of Glasgow, the male life expectancy is 28 years younger in Colton, in the centre of poor Glasgow, compared to Lenzie, which is a suburb 5 miles away. 28 years difference in life expectancy over 5 miles. It's not as bad as that in London. If you get on the Jubilee line at Westminster, life expectancy of babies goes back down by 1 year as you go east to Newham, by 1 year for every stop. Okay. Now that's got nothing to do with genetics. It's got, or so it might seem. It's got everything to do with the environment. But as I was trying to say there, probably not very effectively, the more you know about genetics, the more carefully you can target people at risk of their environment. And I think that's really where the hope lives.
But worried how Scotland is emerging from this. We have an Irish speaker, a Welsh speaker, Scotland is and an English speaker, and
we both went to Edinburgh.
Yes, but Scotland's been mentioned twice now. Glasgow, where you die young, and Aberdeen, where the women are ugly. So we're
Do you think in our lifetime that with the advent of being able to map the human genome, cancer will, in the more regular, more normal cancers that you see, the more frequent cancers that you see occurring, that it will actually become a manageable disease that people can live with, rather like other chronic diseases?
Is it going to be manageable, if not curable?
Yes,
I think that's
exactly,
the question.
manageable rather than curable.
I think that's the expectation, that we can't. It'll be difficult to cure cancer, I think, for a variety of reasons. But at the moment, we do such a bad job that if we could make it more of a chronic condition, which will have periods of remission and relapse and remission and relapse, I think that's quite a laudable goal.
Yes, excellent. We're trying to get through as many questions as possible. It does require you to put your hand up, as if you a forest of hands are going up would be excellent. But what happens at this sort of meeting afterwards? People come up and say, "Oh, I had a good question I was going to ask you," and then they ask you one to one. Yes, please.
I'm a non-scientist, and for me, the names of Crick and Watson are inextricably linked. What did Watson do wrong?
No, it's the Crick Institute. Why is it not the Crick Watson Institute? I think that's the essence of what you're saying.
Jim Watson is a remarkable character. I think that's a polite way of putting it. I once wrote a preface for a new edition of the double helix, his marvelous book about the discovery of DNA. And then in it I said that Newton said that if he'd seen further, it was by standing on the shoulders of giants. Watson and Crick had stood on their toes. And that's clearly true. I mean, they certainly had big feet and they trampled around the place, standing on other scientists' toes. But they got it right. There's a famous issue of Rosalind Franklin. Did they steal the results and so on? I think that misunderstands the nature of science. I mean, results are results. They're not your results. They are, to an extent, public knowledge. But I think it would be a mistake to say that Jim Watson is the easiest person to deal with. He has become perhaps even more rebarbative in his old age. But I'm not really qualified to comment on that. I'll hand it over to another Nobel Prize winner.
Yeah. Has he got his own institute in America? He's American, isn't he, Watkins?
Yeah.
I believe he's of Scottish parentage, so that's probably what did him down.
He is actually. His grandfather, you're quite right,
Yes.
was Scottish, and he loves coming to the UK, particularly to Scottish castles. I have to say, he really likes Scottish castles. Yes. Well, what did Lucky Jim get wrong? I think the reason we call it the Crick Institute, actually the people involved in the double helix structure, and you'll notice when I spoke, I said the discovery that DNA was a genetic material was not made there. It was made 10 years before. I mean, you associate the names of Crick and Watson. We also have Wilkins, who worked here in King's College, and we have Rosalind Franklin. So they're the four who were central to this. Crick, however, I would say you could make a case for being the most important biological scientist from the UK in the 20th century. I mean, it's a bit of a silly thing to say because there's so many who do contribute. He not only contributed to the structure of DNA, which we tend to know him for, but he also contributed greatly to understanding how that DNA encodes for things, encodes for RNA, encodes for protein, which in turn has a very important influence on our phenotype. Notice I said a very important influence, so I'm in the same camp, in fact, as Steve here, because there's not only is that nature, but there's nurture there too. There were some very, very beautiful experiments that Crick carried out, and it's this double whammy, if you like, of both the structure of DNA and what it meant, and also how DNA encodes for information that I think stands him out. And because he was British, he seemed entirely appropriate for the Crick Institute.
You could have called it the Crick-Watson Institute, because their names, as the questioner points out, they go together like, well, Burke and Hare. You know, they're
You know, the problem is, Jim's not here. I know Jim really well, having lived in New York, and he was just up the road. I used to see him really regularly. His ego's already too big. We can't nape in the Institute after him.
Okay.
At least Francis is dead, so it isn't a problem.
Right. Another question, please. Go on, you must have another question. Yes, please.
This has really got nothing to do with science, but I assume it has an awful lot to do with why we're all here this evening. And I'm assuming that you've got people of reasonably high net wealth in the room, or people who know people with high net wealth. How much money are you actually still needing to raise to build this great institute of yours?
Well, I think...
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, Charles Manby is the money man. Or he's just...
Lot. Does this work? Can you hear? Yeah. So...
Not when you're asking for money. We can't hear suddenly.
Would you please shut the doors? There's a short way or a long way. So, on the one hand, an enormous amount of money still to raise, that we need to raise a further £64 million. To put it in context, that means that about £590 million of money has been raised out of the £650 million to build this building. Only Cancer Research UK is fundraising for £100 million out of its £160 million contribution. So that's 100. We've been going a year. We have £34 million raised, of which there are many people in the room who have been involved. It's about half foundations, about half individuals, so we've got £64 million to get raised, which I hope we're going to do, and this is where ignorance breeds confidence, as Charles Darwin said. And I actually was at school with Charles Darwin, at the same school. He was there a little bit before me, but I just wanted to drop that in. So the answer is we've got...
You're trying to say you outrank, that in some way outranks being with St Paul Nurse?
No, it's the sort of 16th. Well, no, it's the 18th century or 19th century equivalent of being at school with Sir Paul Nurse. Okay. So we have £64 million to go, and we would like to get that money raised by 2015 when the building is complete. So that's the ambition.
Excellent. Well, slightly anarchy has broken out in a Crick Institute way, because you're going to come at the end there, and maybe you've said everything you want to say. But now we've got on to questions about the Crick Institute. Is there any more questions about the building, how it's going to work, anything like that? Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll come to you in a moment. But yes.
I have a question which is related to the last question. Since we're sitting here looking at this magnificent building which has started the process of being built, has there been another time in history where people were asked to put some form of funding in for an institute like this over the fullness of the last 100 years? Or is this unique?
I would say this is actually quite a unique project for a couple of reasons. One is the cooperative nature of the project. We are here with CRUK tonight, and they are contributing the second largest amount of money to the Capitol building, but actually the largest amount of money for the operational costs. So that is a very key contribution, and they are a fantastic supporter of the project. But in addition, we have the Medical Research Council, which is government funded, and the Wellcome Trust, which is an endowed charity, unlike CRUK, who has to raise every single pound every single year to support its research. These are the 3 largest biomedical research organisations in the United Kingdom, and then there are 3 universities. Universities don't generally collaborate that well together, I have to say, but in this particular instance they are. And they are University College, where Steve is, Imperial College and King's College. So what's happened is that 6 institutions have got together to collaborate to produce that. And this is unique. I do not know of any other initiative that has actually got that level of collaboration. And that is absolutely fantastic. I worked for 8 years in the US, and that would have been utterly impossible to imagine 6 institutions of that diversity working together to actually produce this institute. So that's one thing. The second is the scale of what we're doing here. It is extraordinarily large. These sums of money are not small. They are very, very large. The running costs will be well in excess each year of £100 million, in excess of £120 million, which we have put together for the first 5 or 6 years. So it's a very, very large institute. It will be essentially the largest coherent institute in Europe. I mean, there is another one in Paris which is larger, but it's largely incoherent as well, called the Institut Pasteur. I'm on their scientific advisory board, so I think I can say that with confidence. And this is a large, coherent institute, and it is probably the largest single laboratory in a single building in the world. I don't know that for certain, but I think it is likely to be, and it's been set up that way to produce the interactions, the collaborations I was talking about during my talk. So there are a number of very unique features about this building and about the institute that will go into it. The size allows us to be multidisciplinary. It allows us to have critical masses in not only biology and biomedicine, but in physics, engineering and computing and clinical researchers as well, because of the outreach into the 3 universities and the 3 medical schools associated with it. There are so many unique features about this that it is indeed, I would say, a real step forward. And just think about it, we are in the middle of a recession. Deepest recession probably since the 1930s. And all of these 6 institutions have got together to produce this large sum of money to get this thing off the ground. I mean, I'm speaking to George Osborne tomorrow, who's completely on board with this. He's going to almost certainly, we're not quite sure about this, but almost certainly do the topping out of the building. He came and gave interviews in the building. The government is very, very behind this, despite the fact it's cutting everywhere. All this is saying that it is recognised across the board that this is a great opportunity. It will keep the UK in the forefront of biomedical research, and keeping it in the forefront of biomedical research will not only produce the understanding of disease that leads to patient benefit, but will also drive economic opportunity through biotechnology and through the pharmaceutical companies that will generate the sorts of discoveries that will also help the economy of the country. And that's why people are investing in it now, and it is going to be successful because of the way we've put it together.
Well done. I think a round of applause, I think, deserved for that inspirational peroration. I feel it may be successful because of your enthusiasm and your leadership. Just remind, when is it likely to actually open?
We top out, as I said, next month. I mean, if you go to St Pancras and you want to go to Leicester, I guess some do want to go to Leicester, but if you look out to the left, you're bad for me. Do you know that? You're bad for me. I'm normally so polite, but and if you look out to the left before you go on, you will see a whole nest of cranes there, and you will see a building which is now about 120 feet high, and it's just there, it's topped out. It's a very complicated building. It will take us 2 years to fit out, and we will then be moving into it. First of all, it's a big merger of 2 very high quality research institutes. There's the CRUK, Cancer Research UK, London Research Institute. Richard Treisman sitting over there. Wave your hand, Richard. Over there is the director of that. That institute will be moving in there. And also the Medical Research Council, National Institute for Medical Research, Mill Hill. They will be moving in there. But then we have the 3 universities and extra money from the Wellcome Trust to actually start doing new things as well. And that will all be in 2015 in the autumn, and we hope to be fully functional in the spring of 2016.
And then you'll have your first love affairs and marriages arranged from these visiting scientists. I think we've all been inspired by this. But I think Charles, you want to say? I don't need to introduce you again, do I? But Charles Manby is the man, and he's going to.
Thank you, Clive. I think it's time to move to drinks. I just wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you to the people who have supported the campaign so far, many of whom in the room. That includes the Western Foundation, the Sackler Foundation, the Wilson Foundation, and of our 34 million to date, and many other individuals, it's about half from foundations and about half from individuals. We have a massive task to go. I'd like to have the opportunity to thank many more other people for their support in the future. So what I'd really like to do is to ask you to give us the opportunity to thank you again in the future. The name's on the card, and we'd love to be in contact. I'm going to finish with Andrew Pisker, and this evening tonight has been 3 members of the board. The board has been tremendous. The board is working very hard. I mark them on how hard they're all working, and then I give them a little jog and say, your turn to do something. So this evening has had Andrew Pisker, Patrick McKenna, and Ray Kelvin have been instrumental in many of the invitations. We've got a great group of people on the board. We're spanning the globe from the United States to Hong Kong. We had our first donation from the Far East of £1 million last week, which actually just came out of and it was actually a letter from a member of the board who said, I think this is a great project. I think we've all heard what a great project this is. This is the Olympics of medical research, and excellence breeds more excellence. And that's, I think, something that the better we can be, with a Crick, or around this country, it's actually going to help our overall economy. And that may be an ignorant statement, but it's an ignorant statement that I think does breed confidence. I have a friend of mine who is the CFO of a non-UK based major pharmaceutical company, and I talked to him about it, and he said, what do you think about it? He said, as we look at the great places to do research, medical research in the world, it's the West Coast of the United States, it's Massachusetts, it's Shanghai, it's London, Oxford, Cambridge, and possibly Basel. That was the way in which he actually phrased it. So I think, we've got a great triangle, and I think by supporting this here, we can create something that will go for generations to come. And to Andrew's point, has this been done before? In 1902, there was a guy called Thomas Rudd. Thomas Rudd was a city financier, and he put an advert in the St. James's Gazette, and he said, London could do with a research institute to address cancer in the way that there is an institute, the Tuberculosis Institute has been established. And he said, perchance £40,000 would be enough to establish this influence. And he raised his £40,000 from 212 people and built what is now the London Research Institute, of which Richard Treisman is the director. And this is not a statistic that is verified in a way that you would put it in a prospectus, but from that institute have come 2 Nobel laureates, one of whom is represented on this tonight, and will be leading the Francis Crick Institute, and the science behind, countless drugs in cancer treatment that might reach as many as half of the drugs in the world today that are actually used to treat cancer. So I hope that, the Francis Crick, as we can all become Ruddites or Crickites and help this great campaign succeed. And so I will carry on being ignorant and confident that we can get to £100 million by the end of 2015. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank you for your support. I'd like to thank Clive for comparing, and I'd like to thank our 3 distinguished scientists for making what has been an absolutely fascinating evening, where I think we've been stimulated and we understand a little bit more, and I hope we feel closer to the campaign that I'm ignorantly confident we will succeed in. Thank you.